Hey everyone, I hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Hamilton Winters and I'm the host of this podcast series called Interactions. Today is episode 9 and I cannot wait for you to dive into this exclusive interview with a friend of mine named John Karabinos. John and I will be discussing the topic of what is your why. Here's episode 9, the interview with John Karabinos. Hope you enjoy it. We'll catch you after. I have a very special guest with me here in the studio, my good friend, John Karabinos. Today we are talking on the topic of what is your why. John, thanks for joining us. How you doing today?
Doing very good. It's been an excellent day.
Good.
We had breakfast this morning at our Bible study, and then we have breakfast tomorrow morning at our other Bible study. There we go.
Yeah.
And so it's very nice to have back-to-back days. Usually we have a little bit of separation, but with all the Christmas that the Christmas and the traveling, it's nice to get back into that weekly routine. And I knew for a while it threw me off, and my why actually kept me through that during that times when it threw off my schedule.
Yeah.
So a little bit of background on me. I am from Johns Creek, Georgia. Was almost born in Mexico City. My dad worked for Coca-Cola. I always tell my mom that she should have had me there, and she was like, no, I couldn't do it. I forget the reason why. She said, oh, what if he wants to be president? I was like, Mom, dual citizenship, I can still be president of the United States. I always rag on her about that, but I'm glad I was born in Georgia. Georgia's my home. Both my parents went to Auburn. I never really wanted to go anywhere else. And when I was young, probably in about the 8th grade, I decided I wanted to be a doctor.
Okay.
2 reasons. One, I was in Boy Scouts, and I always wanted to help people. But the second reason is I wanted to make a lot of money. And that was probably my driving force from 8th grade all the way until probably a couple years ago. I always knew I wanted to make a lot of money, and I think that became the focus of my life for so long.
Yeah.
And along the way in college, I had a lot of hiccups. Got a DUI. I went to jail. That sucked. Went through depression for about, I was 19, probably till I was about 24, 25. About right before I met you is when I started to climb back out of that depth of a hole that I dug myself. And one of the things that really got me through that was, one, faith and coming back around to God, but also him giving me my why in so many different directions.
Yeah.
So my why still consisted of when I was at 8th grade to help people. That was the center. But then it can also always change and grow in different directions that you want to. The direction that you go can always be moving, and it can always change. But as long as you're heading in the right in a direction, you'll never go back into your old ways when you were, whether lazy, procrastinating, all the negative experiences, the mindset that you have. You can tend to slide back like I have done so many times. But when you have that why, what your definite focus is in life, you'll always push forward no matter what you're going to go through.
Yeah.
And so for the longest time, I went through a lot of different challenges in the last 5 years. And so I'm in insurance now, but wanted to go to med school, went to Auburn, and did really good my first year. And then I started partying like everybody does. I started drinking, started smoking, and it really just felt empty inside. And at a certain point, I realized I didn't want to go to med school. I didn't want to accumulate all this debt. I didn't want to go to school for another 10 years and then pay off all that money until I was 40.
Wait, you're saying it's expensive to become a doctor?
No, it's absolutely not expensive. No, it is. It's about, the med school I was looking at was about $200,000.
Wow.
By the time, just for 4 years, and that's not including residency. You're not getting paid during any of that.
Yeah, that's rough.
I didn't want to.
Thank God somebody does it, though.
Oh, thank God.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard Pete Maravich's testimony?
Pete who?
Pete Maravich. He was
a
LSU basketball player, ended up playing for the Utah Jazz and actually for the Atlanta Hawks.
Oh.
And so Pistol Pete Maravich was a phenomenal basketball player.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, growing up, my dad would give out his testimony on CD to anybody and everybody. So regardless if it was, hey, John Karabinos, I met you at lunch, here's a CD, take it with you. Or if it was DeMarcus Ware, who plays for the Dallas Cowboys or played for the Dallas Cowboys, and stopped for gas one day in West Monroe, Louisiana, my hometown, And Dad saw me. He's like, "You play ball somewhere?" And this huge dude.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "Yeah, I play for the Cowboys or whatever." So he's like, "Here's a CD. Take it with you." So I mean, tons of these CDs given out. Pete Maravich, his whole goal in life was to be the highest paid NBA contract ever, entering in out of college. And he had an extreme amount of wealth, got there, ended up never made him happy, right? It was all empty. Until about 2 years before he died, he ended up finding Christ, giving his life to Christ, getting baptized, ended up going on the speaking tour, right? And so this testimony he gives at Evangel High School in Louisiana, Shreveport, Louisiana. And he says two things. It's lonely at the top, right? When you get there, you have nobody to share all these things with, right? And the other one is, money will buy you everything but happiness, and it'll pay your fare to every place but heaven. He had it all, but he had nothing. And going back to what you said, if you don't revisit your why, which to me in business, you have to revisit your purpose, your principles. Why are we doing what we're doing? Because if we lose track of why we're doing what we're doing, are we doing anything? If we're doing something, is it meaningful?
If you're not doing anything, you automatically evolve into something you don't want to be. So you have to have that at the forefront of your mind constantly. I started a new book called The Secret. It's a 4-hour audible book. I was like, oh, I can finish this in a day, so I'm halfway done with it. And the secret is simple. It's what you have at the forefront of your mind and you think of constantly, you will attract in life. So
they have a documentary. Yeah. Seen the documentary?
I have not seen it. They were talking about it.
It's like, a little bit cheesy. It is. It's a little bit. Yeah, Russell's nodding his head. It's a little bit cheesy.
I'm all about cheesy.
And you'll watch it and you'll say, Hamilton said it was cheesy, and it is, because somebody told me it was cheesy. So forewarned.
Yeah.
But it's good, and I'm a believer in that.
Is that
what you put
Netflix?
your energy towards? Yeah, it's Netflix.
Okay.
What you put your energy towards, you do attract. And if that's positivity, if that's wealth, if that's knowledge, if that's relationships. But like you said, and this is, I think, a Batman quote, you either die as a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Hell yes.
Right?
That's a Batman quote.
Yeah. So I thought you'd appreciate that. So those of you that don't know John, don't know that he reads more than anybody that I've ever met. John is my walking encyclopedia. I'm not a huge reader. I'd like to say that I am. But because of that, it's nice knowing that if I want to read a book but don't have time, John's probably already read it. And I can just ask John for a little quick summary. Yeah. So, John, why don't you tell us about some of your New Year's resolutions? Because you were talking about them this morning, and it was so
there are
respectable.
3 resolutions, dreams, or goals that I have for this year. The first one is I've battled with weight since I was little. Lost a lot of weight going into high school. I was 190. I was working out, running. I looked good. Let's put it that way. In college, I gained the freshman 15, and then the freshman 30, and then the sophomore 30, and then gained another 10 pounds a little bit after that. So I gained about 50 pounds in college. Lost all of that weight twice, gained it back. Now I'm sitting around 220. And so one of my New Year's resolutions is by May 18th, my birthday, I want to get back down to 190. Just through eating right, not working out. I'll go work out every once in a while, but I'd rather get my habits down around eating. Yeah. So when I do start working,
it's 85% diet. We've talked about this before.
Yeah, it is.
Because I was heavy set, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like everybody needs to be heavy set at least once. Russell's never been heavy set. It's not his fault, but it's okay.
Genes, I love it.
Being able to be in a state, right? A state that you don't necessarily desire. Realizing that you're in that state that you don't necessarily desire. Making the change to become the person that you would rather be, right? And then realizing that you are that person. And then dealing with the consequences, right? You kind of become a jerk when you lose a lot of weight. I don't know if you experienced that. I did. Because you're on top of the world. It's like, oh, yeah.
I got this. Your sense of ego and your pride.
And all these girls start talking to you.
Exactly.
And all of these, your clothes look better. You start to feel better. Your confidence goes up. But then you have to correct it. And if you don't correct it, and I think that this is a perfect example of what you were just talking about. If you lose sight of your why, you become the person that you never wanted to be.
Yep.
and your why was admirable, and so was mine, lose a lot of weight. But if you do it and you don't remember why you lost that weight, which was to feel better, or which was to fit in your clothes, or to gain more confidence, and then you become this person that you never wanted to be, and then your whole life falls apart, and then you ask yourself, was it worth it? But you go back. It is 85% diet.
Yeah.
Right?
So when the first 2 times that I've lost all my weight, it was for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
It was all about the girls.
Exactly.
And all about looking good, feeling good, yes, but
yeah,
it wasn't just to live a healthy lifestyle, which is my why now for that.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, because that's one of my episodes coming up. I don't know when, but it's going to be on health is more than a number, right? I'd much rather my blood tell me that I'm healthy than a number on a scale. I'd much rather feel better and then in turn look better than to look better and sacrifice feeling better. Because I know a lot of people that you would think are the healthiest people in the world. No.
Yeah.
You should see how they eat.
You can be a stick. You can be fit and have abs, but still feel very bad just based on what you eat and what you do on a daily basis.
Exactly.
Like
well, thank God the dad bod is a thing.
There you go.
Right? So we're not necessarily having to reach the same bar as maybe our predecessors did. But talk to me a little bit about some of the books that you've read recently, or some of the books. Because this morning you said that you made a really weird statement to me, which I told Russell about. It was very strange to me. You said, I'm halfway through one book, and I'm like a part of the way through another book. And that was like, wait, you are able to start a new book before you finish another one. I'm bad about not finishing, but I know you'll finish. What you've done is you've dove head first into 2 separate books. And how do you do that? How do you juggle that? We'd all like to know the John Karabinos secret to reading. Please share it with the world.
2 things. One of the back to kind of reflect back to my goals for this year is to read 2 books a month. So 24 books the entire year.
That's huge.
How I get there, don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it regardless.
And this isn't Cat in the Hat. This is legit books.
These are 200-plus page books from spiritual life all the way to success, all the way to personal enjoyment.
And this is on top of other reading that you're doing, correct?
Yes. So I'm reading I'm reading 2 devotionals, and one devotional is 3-month segments, so that'll be 4 out of the year. Another one is on my phone. It's called My Utmost for His Highest. That itself is a book, a complete book, 365 pages of it, and that does a Bible in a year. So that's another 2 books. That's 6 right there. I have 2 books that I am reading. One is The Laws of Success, and each week is a different law. And so you focus on achieving that, not achieving it, working it into your life and exemplifying that each week.
Implementation.
Implementing, thank you, throughout that whole week, and you focus on those. And then another one is the same thing, 52 weeks. So right there's 8 books. So really only have to read 16 for the rest of the year. But I'm not going to lower my standard. I still want to read 2 books a month.
I think you could lower your standard, and none of us would. I'm glad that you're not. I'm glad that you're a man of your word. And I hate that we couldn't have all 4 of the versions of John here today, because the other 3 are back reading. I can only get the one that is here sitting in front of me. There has to be 4 of you to do as much as.
In the back of the head, still just thinking about
goodness.
All of it.
I mean, you're one of the more ambitious people that I've ever met, and I respect that.
Thank you.
About you. I guess give the listeners a little bit of background about how you and I became acquainted.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of by happenstance.
It was back in October? No, I think
it wasn't that long ago.
It was probably late October, early November.
Mm-hmm.
We were at a small group on Friday mornings called Purpose on Tap, led by a guy named Tucker, and he's fantastic.
Tucker Yates.
He is one of my spiritual mentors that I loved speaking with him. He is so knowledgeable, and I started going to Purpose on Tap, I think 2 years ago, but it was never consistent. It was probably once a quarter, and with my brother who goes there. And I was without a job for a year. I was in the brewing industry, left that job, didn't know what I was going to do, and was kind of lost for a while. and then got a job in the insurance industry. And once that thing started to pick up, I started to go back to Purpose on Tap. And I think it was my third time going back is when you were there and you shared a story about, I believe it was Caleb, your first video, first podcast. And I was like, dude, I need to get to know him.
Yeah.
And so we scheduled coffee for next week, the week after, and then we had pretty much coffee every week except over Christmas.
Yep.
And so that's
Which
how
we're going to pick back up on that next week.
Yeah, we will.
We did technically have coffee together today.
We did
at Cracker Barrel.
I counted that.
But and one of the cooler stories that I can think of that happened in the last, 2 or 3 months, John was there for it. So our men's group that meets on Wednesdays, it's about 5 or 6 of us. It's called a Fight Club. It's kind of organized around Passion City Church, but we had created this group, and we had ended up moving it away from Tuesday morning, 6 a.m. at Cracker Barrel on Delk Road, and I guess it's Smyrna, Marietta, Cobb County, whatever, that unincorporated area of northwest Atlanta.
And it actually is right near where I used to work.
Yeah, John's stomping grounds. We had moved it from there to a Starbucks for like 2 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so all of a sudden, our numbers started decreasing, and we realized that pancakes had a lot to do with it. Starbucks doesn't serve pancakes, right? It's hard to get somebody to wake up at 6 or earlier than that, be there at 6 a.m. without some sort of motivation, right? Pancakes, the grandma sampler.
The why is the
hug,
pancakes right
exactly, dude. The hug from Miss Yvonne, our waitress, who we hadn't seen in 2 months. So we made the executive decision to move it back to Cracker Barrel. So we go back there, bro. And you know this, I was dying for some pancakes.
Oh, yeah.
I had talked about it for weeks about why are we not moving it back? We need to go back, whatever. We go back, and as soon as we put in our order, all the power goes out.
Huge storm going on outside.
All the power goes out. But only the power for Cracker Barrel and the hotel next to it. Only 2 buildings in that whole area lost power. Cracker Barrel and the hotel. So they turned on all of the kerosene lamps. And luckily there was a fire lit. It was really cold. And it was so cool because we all huddled around the fire. And thank God we had hot coffee. But we dug into the Word. And we went through the Purpose on Tap devotional. And it's so funny because that morning, the message was titled, Be Patient. And as soon as I started reading it out of the book, everybody got quiet, and the entire restaurant was able to hear the message on patience.
The waiters, the cooks.
The waiters, the cooks, everybody in the restaurant got quiet. And I gave this little message, and we talked about it. I don't know what I said afterwards. It was be patient.
Yeah.
But that was so cool. And the power didn't come on for another 2 hours or something. But everybody resumed their day.
Yeah, and even after we left, it still wasn't on.
Yeah. But we stayed there longer. It was probably the best day that we ever had. I didn't get my pancakes for another week.
Yeah, we were there for 2.5 hours.
I didn't. And I was chapped about it at first. But my why was different than his why. Right?
He's like, pancakes are for another time.
No pancakes for you, Hamilton. I'm sorry. You're going to have to wait for your maple syrup and grandma sampler, but I'll give you plenty of coffee, and I'll give you a platform to be able to share a message that I need shared. Right? So I would really appreciated that you were part of that story.
Yeah.
And I'd never told that story, especially, I've told it to a couple of people, but never over a platform like this. So with that being said, with this topic, what is your why? Are there a couple of words that you would say, I really resonate with these couple of words? Or a phrase that's like, if John Karabinos, if you'd never got to meet him, but I could give you a phrase to sum him up, or something you want on your headstone. I know it sounds morbid. It's a great way for people to think about how they want to be remembered. Do you want to be remembered as the guy that said he wanted to do all this stuff? You want to be remembered as, the guy that, was jacked everybody around? Or do you want to be the guy that was open to everybody? Or the one that repaid all of his debts, or forgave all of his debts, right? So you tell me, is there?
So when I think of what is your why, it's funny how I literally I sat down, I was like, I got to read for 20 minutes. I haven't read today. And I read a chapter on the why is always more important than the what, and beginning with the end in mind. So you talked about what do you want on your gravestone. Take that a step further. Who are the 5 people that are going to be speaking at your funeral? And what are they going to say about you? Is it going to be family? Is it going to be friends? Are they going to be speaking how much he cared for other people? Nobody's going to care, oh my God, he was the best vice president of the bank of all time, of this branch, and he made so much money, this and this and this. Nobody's going to say what kind of person that person he was, or how he impacted my life and how he changed this, or and how he helped other people. They're never going to tell him how much money he made, how much of they may say how successful he was, but that's not going to be the focal point. So when I think of what is your why, the main thing for me is what impact and legacy am I leaving behind me, not just in my future family, but in the people that I meet on a day-to-day basis. One of the things that I want to do on a day-to-day basis is impact one person a day. Even if I don't even realize I impacted them, I still want to help impact somebody. And that's my goal. It's my life statement. So I want there to be 3, 4, 5,000 people there, and each one of them is somebody that I personally impacted.
Yeah.
My measure of success is how many people are better off because I lived.
And that's one thing that we've talked about at coffee before.
Yeah.
It's how do you compare generations to one another? They had different technologies. They had different, there were different populations in the world. There were different events happening. There were, how do you compare one person's life living in one time versus another? And I don't think that there is a better metric to measure a life against another than the amount of people that were positively impacted. And if you look at the richest people, well, that's great. Look at Jeff Bezos. And then look at his charitable giving. What is he doing with it all? And look, I'm not here to judge Jeff Bezos or any other billionaire on the amount of money that they're giving back. It's their money. Do what they want to with it. But my list of the most successful people doesn't have Jeff Bezos on it.
Same.
With that being said, what are you doing to ensure that you're on the right list? And I think that that's a fantastic question to ask, and it's a fantastic answer for that question. And I'll say it like this. You can't be everything to everyone, but you can be something to someone. So if you can commit to being something to someone every day, you live a lot of days. And if tomorrow is your last day, did you do what you were supposed to do today to make sure that you left everything the way you wanted to leave it? And that's a rhetorical question. But I'd like to think that when we transition out of this life and they throw a party for us, right? They'll pop a VCR in the tape deck and be like, hey, you don't know that all this happened, but just sit here and watch. That guy that you were nice to, that you didn't even know that you were nice to him, he went on to do this. And these are all the lives that he impacted. And it almost sounds selfish when you think about it. You want a big party in heaven, right?
Of course.
You want to see all the people that you brought with you. And then it changes your perspective on why you're doing what you're doing. What do you have to do today? Well, I got to do this, and I'm in a hurry. I'm going to be late to that meeting. Well, hold on. Jesus had the entire world to save, and he walked everywhere. What are you running for? What are you in a hurry for? Does it really matter?
Yeah, that's true. That also comes to a point where, are you managing your time right and your priorities? Because if you say, oh, I got to get to this meeting and this meeting's important, well, what did you do leading up to that meeting? What did you do the night before to prepare for that?
Exactly.
One of my favorite sayings is proper preparation prevents poor performance. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. That's a mouthful, bro. It is. It's an alliteration.
I like that, though.
Going back to English class.
Yeah.
Help me God.
Say it one more time. Proper
preparation prevents poor performance. So as long as you're prepared for the day, that's why one of the things I have to plan my night out before and then read that in the morning, because if I don't, I will not know what is vitally important for me.
Of course.
And so I have a critical task list, or 5 or 6 things that I have to do that I don't like to do, but I need to get those done in order to keep my life on track and not fall off from the things that I do. Yeah. So one of them is, reading for an hour or 2 hours a day. whether that's in the morning. Not watching TV, I gave TV up this year, which has helped me read a lot. And you thought I was an encyclopedia, just it's going to be a library soon.
Yeah, that's good. Coming soon.
Yeah, coming soon, John Karabinos Library. Which actually was one of my goals, is to have a library. And I was thinking today is, I forget who does it, but they sponsor books out to schools.
That's
and
cool.
One of my dreams way down the line is to sponsor the entire state of Georgia's books for high school, middle school,
Wow.
elementary school. Get a big dream that God has to help you and get behind you.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge dream, and that's only like a little segment of it.
Yeah. Well, you've already spoken it out in the universe. You can't get it back now.
Nope,
So.
yeah. It's coming towards me, law of attraction.
Right? The secret.
It is.
But, okay, so we know you read a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Do you write?
I do. You actually recommended right before Christmas. This is perfect timing. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah.
So I write about 3 times a week, or if I have something that I'm just anxious about, I write. If I have something that I just need to put words to paper or track my goals, whatever it is, I put that down on paper, and it allows me to see it from an outside perspective. So I can reflect on it and get past the emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So I can think logically about, does this make sense or not? How is this affecting me in this situation? And there are so many times over the last month that it has helped me realize things that I haven't realized for a while. And one of them was, so I got the journal, and we go to my family's Christmas over in Huntsville, Alabama. And I was hanging out with my cousin Sam, who is, I think, a year or 2 younger than me. He's in college. He's about to finish up at Alabama, bless his soul. And he's had a hard life. Parents do well, but just the cards he's been dealt has been tough.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was speaking to him, he kind of peeled back the onion layers and let me inside for a minute. And I was just like, what the heck? How have I not known this or seen
Mm-hmm.
this? And at that moment, I was like, all right, my why's changed. Yes, I want to help people, but I want to be the example for my family
Mm-hmm.
and set the standard and be the next leaders, because my father and my uncle, Sam's dad, are the people that have really helped the family get on their feet. And a lot of our family does not do well financially, personally. They are starting to get there, but that was because of my dad and because of my uncle.
Yeah.
And so I look at the next generation, my brother, me, Sam, and all the other cousins. All right, who's coming on as the next leaders?
Mm-hmm.
And I see nobody stepping into that gap.
Yeah.
And so when I saw that, I was like, all right, Sam's like, I need to help Sam. But then I start to go up, and I'm going to go read and go to bed. And my aunt stops me, and she's alcoholic, love her to death. Comes up to me, she says, thank you for taking care of the next generation. I'm just like, I literally start crying. I'm about to start crying, damn it.
Yeah.
Sorry,
It's okay.
cut that out.
And they couldn't see you,
And
so.
yeah, and it literally, like, I was,
That's huge.
yeah, and I thought about that 2 years prior and
Yeah.
prayed for that. I was like, I've literally thought that whole scenario, and it took 2 years to culminate,
Mm-hmm.
planted the seed in my mind, and it finally germinated. And I'm just like, wow.
Yeah.
Next morning, my dad says, thank you for making an impact on Sam, because Sam would always just be a riot. Nobody could kind of not control him, but
Mm-hmm.
get to him. But the example that I've set, I've made an impact on Sam that I didn't even realize that I had.
Yep.
And at that moment, I'm just like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
time to step in this. God's going to test your character. And if you fail this test, there's going to be even worse calamity than if you pass.
Yeah.
And I don't want that calamity to, one, befall me, but also befall my family, because if I fail, they fail.
Yeah.
Not that they will fail, but
No, that makes
they
sense.
won't get up to the place that I know they can, and they'll go sliding backwards into their old ways.
That makes sense. I think 2 things to your point, which incredible story.
Thank you.
I
I thank you for that.
I didn't do anything.
I literally, once I had that conversation with my aunt, I literally went down. The first page in my journal is that.
That's
and so
huge.
it's literally my why.
That's huge.
And I started just to notice things that one of my mentors He says, if you can't recognize yourself from 6 months ago, what are you doing with your life? If you say you're committed to growth and change and creating a positive impact and setting a standard for somebody, and you don't, if you're still doing the same things and you can recognize yourself from 6 months ago, you're not doing anything with your life. And I'm paraphrasing. He said it a lot nicer. I'm more direct, and
I like that.
And so at that moment, I was like, I don't even recognize myself from 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, okay, and that's getting me more motivation to keep going and keep reading and sacrifice things now for a reason and a season. It doesn't have to be forever. So, I get up at 5 a.m. I listen to
respect.
Yeah, it's not every day. Saturdays I do sleep in until 7 or 8. Sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's 8, depending on the night before.
Yeah.
Like last weekend, I went to go see Aquaman, fantastic movie.
Yeah.
And I made the decision of seeing it at 9:45.
Oh yeah, that's a late one.
It was a bad decision.
Yeah.
I was almost asleep, but I come back and I still wake up at 7 in the morning.
Yeah.
And so I'm starting to realize that I don't need as much sleep as I actually do, and so I have more time in the morning for things that will move my life forward. So I read for about 2 hours in the morning now.
That's huge.
About 2-3 times during the week.
Wow.
So I'm getting up at 4:30 instead of 5 now. The plan's
it's like my mom. My mom does that. Of
Yeah.
course, she's also the most efficient and effective person that I've ever met. And so obviously it's one thing to admire something about someone. It's another thing to emulate that. And the emulation is where we all seem to have an issue. With the 4:30. I just can't. I'll get there one day maybe. Going back to your story, I wanted to say two things. Towards the end, when you were saying if you fail, then the family fails. I don't want you to take on that stress, because I don't believe that if you fail, the family fails. I think that there's no doubt that you will succeed. It depends on what you categorize your success as. It's what your perspective on success is, right? So don't set those expectations so high, because expectations are just premeditated disappointments. So go in expectant on God, right, and what he's going to do for you now that you know that you have your head on straight and that you're having an impact on someone that, you were the only one that could get to him. That's huge. Do not take that lightly. But two, going back to what you were saying about Caleb, and we have not produced Caleb's story yet. It was going to be the first one. We ended up producing it on video, but it didn't come out. Not yet. Hopefully we'll be able to talk about it one day. But I had a lot of stress from that situation. Long story short, Caleb is a homeless man I befriended, and some really amazing God stuff happened, and it kind of dwindled off. One reason or another, I held guilt on that because I was not continuing the story, right? But had I continued the story, I would have been forcing it. So there's one thing to plant the seed. There's another thing to sit there and watch the tree grow. That's not your job. No farmer makes money sitting there and watching the corn grow. He makes money by planting the seed, checking on it, seeing what adjustments need to be made, or hiring someone better than him at that particular stage until at the end, the harvest comes and everyone gets to enjoy the fruits of the labor, right?
There's also another scenario.
What's that?
When you plant a seed and you want it to grow and you expect it to grow, but then you keep digging up the seed. You keep digging up the seed to see if it hasn't grown, and you keep putting it back.
Perfect.
And yet you're watering it, but it's not getting the nutrients it needs from the soil.
Yep.
You got to have faith that it eventually grow.
Yep.
There's the Chinese bamboo tree out in China, and for 5 years it does not grow, but within the span of 8 to 9 weeks, it grows over 50 feet.
Wow.
Imagine being a farmer for 5 years and you water it day after day after day.
That's amazing.
Imagine pulling up that seed every once in a while. It'll die after a while.
You can't do it. Anything. You can't do it. I wonder who the first person that realized that it was like a 5 to 6 year mark was. That one guy that was like, I know something that y'all don't know. I'm just going to hang out here for like 5 or 6 years. And then like all of a sudden like 50 feet and everybody's like, what? What's up with my bamboo?
It's like,
Yeah.
man, you've been digging it up. You turned it into like a little popcorn kernel over there. And, you know. But think about how many seeds that you plant, and some of them might not even grow.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that you don't need to go and plant seeds. You reap what you sow, right?
Mm-hmm.
The parable. It's true. But I didn't want you to leave here with some sort of stress that it's all on you.
Oh, it's the stress for me. It's not stress. It's motivation for me. I don't see it as stress. I'm seeing it as accepting responsibility for my actions, but then also picking up the responsibility for my family. Because I have a responsibility to my family, whether I like it or not. I do love my family, and I love having a responsibility to them. And I use that as fuel to keep me going, not as a stress that's keeping me back.
Use it as fuel for your why.
Exactly. So I always, like, almost every single morning I think about my family. Thinking about all the battles that each of us have, the ones that are known and unknown, and seeing them overcome that, and seeing them in a better situation than they are currently. And essentially beginning with the end in mind, and how you get to that end doesn't matter. It can always change. But you want to make sure you're in the right vehicle to get to that end. And so using that as my why is much more efficient than trying to use it as, let me rephrase this. Fear is the fear of losing something is more powerful than the
Motivation to gain it.
motivation to gain it. And so the fear of where my family will be if I don't become the man I'm supposed to be is much, I fear that so much more than the motivation to get all this wealth and live in a nice house, travel all over the world. I don't care if I travel all over the world.
Yeah.
I don't care if I don't make another penny for the rest of my life. That would obviously not be nice, but I would be okay with it as long as I know that I helped another person.
Well, you're not thinking about your destination. You're thinking about all the things that you're leaving in your wake, right? If you get in a boat and you're like, I'm dead set on going to that island, well, you forget about everything else that you're leaving behind you.
And that's one of the struggles for me. So when my ability to focus is so narrow, I can tunnel vision 100%, and sometimes I get too strict, not with myself, but with others. And if things get in the way, I will not punch them in the face physically, but metaphorically.
Yeah.
And like, I was like, look, this is where I'm going. Get out of my way.
Yeah.
And if they don't, I tend to hurt them.
Yeah.
And I also have a big heart. So it's a battle between those two competing forces. And I have to realize that constantly. And so when I started this new year and kind of leading up to it, I started pushing people a lot more than I usually do. I usually overreact and then tend to draw the lines a little bit back at a time, then expand the lines a little bit at a time. Because when I can control the slow reaction or contraction from it, but trying to force it little by little by little, that just seems like for me a little bit more wasted strength and wasted mental effort than allowing things to shrink back.
Yeah.
Because then if you like spring cleaning, you have a bunch of clothes in your closet. I've been meaning to do this for a very long time. I have probably 50, 60 shirts that I have not worn since either high school or the beginning of college. And it's all in there. And so when you clean it all out, you have room for so much more stuff. And so that's like how I'm doing things with my life.
That's the dangerous part, though.
It is.
Don't go buy hangers. You'll just go buy more clothes.
The bad part is when you have dry cleaning and you get 10 hangers every time you
dude,
do dry
I know.
cleaning.
That's brutal.
Yeah.
But with this topic of what is your why, it seems like we're touching on purpose, which is fantastic. And to the point that you just made, those people that seem to be standing in your way, I found it effective to pray for doors to be opened, but just as much to pray for doors to be closed, right? To know which doors I'm never supposed to walk through, and for both of them to be obvious, right?
And if God wants a door closed on a person,
he's going to close it.
He'll close it. But then if he doesn't, that person can always walk back in. But they have to make the decision to come back in.
Yeah. And to be flexible with your purpose. So we use it as a singular term, when really it should be plural. Purposes. How many purposes are you going to live out, John Karabinos?
And that's why it can always change, because once you accomplish one purpose,
then you use it as a springboard to accomplish another purpose.
Exactly. You're
And
climbing
you
the
continue with, even though the purpose might change, the why doesn't have to, right? You can continue to add on different motives. But when you look at it, if you have that one solid bedrock, that foundation, that one just motivating factor, it says John Karabinos does everything for blank, and I don't know what it is for you. But if you have that word, that bedrock word, it's, man, anything you do is going to be on such a stronger foundation moving forward than if it's like building your house on the sand or building it on the rock, man.
Mm-hmm.
So, I wanted to tell you thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you for challenging.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's a pleasure to have guys like you, girls on the show sometime soon. We've only had 2 guests, Mr. Russell Pizzuto and Mr. John Karabinos, but we're going to have some more guests coming up here soon. We all benefit from your experience, right? I only get to tell one side of the story, of any story, right? And you get to tell one side of a story. But together, we get to tell 2 sides of 2 stories. And we've doubled the amount of not only information going out there, but the shared experience that people can have by association, right? Anybody that shares their experience with me, I had that experience somewhat by association. So what I'm going to challenge the listeners with, and I'll challenge you with this too, walk up to someone and ask them for either a story, tell me a story, or give me your best piece of advice. My dad tells me that all the time. He said, any interview you go into, anybody that you go, business meeting, anything, he said, ask them for their best piece of advice. One, if they don't give it to you, very few would not give you a piece of advice. 2, if they give it to you and it's not worth anything, whatever. If they give it to you and it is worth something, it could be the most invaluable thing that they ever tell you. And it shows them that you value their opinion and their advice. So regardless if you love the person or you hate the person, on the way out of the door, you can look at them and say, before I leave, give me your best piece of advice. And I guarantee you that'll stick in their mind. Any closing thoughts before we leave out? And tell us if you have anything to promote, if you have business you need to promote or whatever. This is a platform for that as well.
So there are 3 things. One, be learning from other people. There's one of the books that I'm reading is Dynamic People Skills by Dexter Yeager, and he was talking about ego in my reading last night, and how if you let go of your ego and you stay humble, you can always learn from other people, whether it's their successes or failures, whether they're doing a good job or a bad job. It doesn't matter who they are. You can always learn from somebody if you have the open mind from it. 2, in relating to advice, is when you're asking somebody for advice, look at the fruit on their tree. Don't just take their advice at surface level. You make sure they have the results in their life on the advice they're giving.
I don't want to take marriage advice from somebody that's been divorced 5 times.
Exactly. They may have gotten it from a meme on a picture on Facebook or Reddit or whatever. Yeah. And they're just repeating it with no
And I hope that that's not the best advice that they've ever been given, right?
Yeah.
I've heard it put this way one time. I think my dad shared this with him. Somebody at some judges conference that they went to or something said, here, take my advice. I'm not using it. What? Here, take my advice. I'm not using it. So don't be that person. But how can they get in touch with you?
Find me on Facebook, John Karabinos, Karabinos. Yeah, that's about it.
Good deal. Yeah, if you need John for anything, we're here in Atlanta. I get to see him every week, thankfully. Your friendship's a blessing to me.
Same.
Looking forward to this next year and seeing your success and to continuing and investing in each other and in the development and growth, both spiritually and personally, business related. So thank you again for being on the show. This was a good experience for me. I hope that it was a good experience, valuable for you.
It clarifies when you think it through things, think it with other people. You're not just thinking in your head and you're thinking, oh, wow, am I crazy?
Exactly.
And you get to bounce it off other people